Ladies and gentlemen, after an extended stay in the technological doldrums where the internet cannot be found in one's home, Dazza's War on Everything returns once again to grace your monitors. Now, as most of you know, I prefer not to do personal blogs. There are enough personal diaries on the internet to make me want to vomit. But the sheer farce that the last 8 weeks has been, just couldn't go undocumented. Now, in early October I started work as a site engineer for a Sydney-based civil construction company. Now, I don't know what it's like for the rest of Australia, much less the rest of the world, but Sydney-siders seem to have this belief that spending 2 to 3 hours each day in their cars, on the bus, or on the train, commuting for work is valuable use of one's personal time. This is not a theory that I subscribe to, since my former home in Wollongong was a good hour and a half on the train from the office in Sydney's southern suburbs. Enter the wonderful world, then, of share accommodation. There are many websites out there set up to help people find homes and flatmates. In many respects, they're a lot like personal columns. If you advertise things like your age, your sexual preference, likes, dislikes, the utilities and services you provide, and what you're looking for in that blissful domestic partnership. Unfortunately, my initial experience had a little more in common with an adult personal's website, because in this instance, I got screwed. For Lease was a 4-year-old 7th floor penthouse apartment in Rockdale, just 10 minutes drive to the office. Rent was pitched at $640 a month, and the establishment of such features such as an ADSL2 connection were supposedly in hand. On inspection I was greeted with a functionally tidy place which had an awesome view, though the accumulation of crappy and or tacky furniture did seem a little irksome. The tenants assured me, however, that they were just in the process of moving some stuff around. And I think we can all appreciate how disorganised a little spring cleaning can appear. I thought I got along fairly well with the couple with whom I'd be sharing the apartment. In fact, we were there chatting for about 3 hours. Yet, despite what would seem an otherwise perfect inspection, there were so many signs unnoticed of the disaster that was to come. I moved in on the eve of October 29th, not completely mind you, as I still had an active lease at my beloved Coolabong house, and I knew I'd be doing a little shuttling back and forth for work, uni and friends. The first thing I noticed after my move, however, was the smell, and it smelt of feet. Perhaps this was just a result of moving into a freshly vacated bedroom and bathroom, and yet nothing a little room freshener couldn't handle. What appeared to be beyond room freshening, however, was the kitchen. Now, before you blow me off as being a neat Nazi, remember I am a member of the male race, and a little mess here and there is hardly going to cause a hernia. The kitchen was unfit to prepare food for human or animal consumption 90% of the time. Even if one could ignore the 1/4-inch layers of fat on the grills, pots and pans, or the ecosystems that had begun to evolve on the bench tops, there would be nothing to eat it with anyway, as a layer of grime that was once food covered just about every item of cutlery, crockery or glass. Fortunately, due to the multicultural bonanza that Sydney has become, cheap and reliable takeaway services had sprung up in easy reach. In fact, the apartment complex featured a Subway restaurant at street level. The kitchen was thus not an immediate problem, though the lack of internet service was beginning to grate me, so I approached the subject with my new flatmates. Let's call them Fatty and Gromit. I soon discovered my flatmates were disgruntled former employees of Aussie telecommunications giant Telstra, so they felt their best option was to use their knowledge of the system to fraudulently give themselves a massive credit on a wireless internet account until the ADSL2 was sorted out. Shortly afterward, I purchased a new laptop and was anxious to get it online and set up. But Windows Vista is an unfriendly beast, and I required a little technical help from Telstra's technical support to get the internet working on it. A quick phone call later and I was well on the way to completing the setup of the new toy, until Fatty and Gromit realised what I was doing. Apparently the Telstra operator on the other end hadn't followed correct security procedures, offences for which Fatty and Gromit believed they were fired from Telstra for. Gromit took my phone and proceeded to berate the Telstra techie and filed a complaint against him with threat of legal action. But karma comes around full circle. A quick inspection of the internet account revealed a fraudulent crediting of the account had occurred, and it was terminated by Telstra. So now there was no internet service, and with Fatty hell-bent on getting a cheap service bundle with Optus, that gave me little room to manoeuvre in terms of helping the process along. The main problem was it generally took 45 minutes on hold with Optus to speak to a consultant, and Fatty simply lacked the attention span to see it through. Attention spans. Now that seems to be an area in which they were completely lacking. Continuing the fine university tradition of cheap Tuesdays at Domino's Pizza, I did the best I could to include them in the goodness of $5 large pizzas. But with the ever-present distractions brought about by untreated cases of attention deficit disorder, ordering a pizza was a 30-minute affair, which went on easily to explain why we managed to get chatting for 3 hours on the initial meet. Many people with ADD have gone on to live perfectly normal lives, but Fatty and Gromit appear to have lined up for free marijuana when they were giving out common sense. Picture this for a moment. Gromit appears to suffer from a sort of chronic fatigue which often results in dimming of his vision and occasionally fits.
This had been happening for the last 2 years, but now the fits were coming every night.
Not to worry, at every turn a glass of extra sweet and cordial from Fatty just seemed to get him right back on his feet.
No need to worry about hospitals or medical professionals. Dr. Fatty knows best.
But think about it, fits miraculously cured by sugar. Is there any possibility at all that this might be diabetes? 2 weeks later I was proved correct. However, this presented another rather frightening scenario.
Diabetics are required to inject themselves with insulin twice a day to better regulate their blood sugar.
But are ADD and needles necessarily compatible? Due to the messy state of the bathroom that he shared with Fatty, Gromit took to giving himself insulin injections in my bathroom. Now, I'm not going to be the one to stand in the way of anyone's necessary medical treatment.
However, I seriously didn't appreciate used and uncapped syringes being left on my bath mat.
Now, while Gromit might not have had it completely together upstairs, he was by and large a nice fellow, which is more than I can say for Fatty.
Fatty lived in her own little world, a world where she could do no wrong. In fact, she was so convinced of her moral superiority that she had accrued some $14,000 in legal debts, attempting to demonstrate that fact to the courts.
This debt placed a lot of financial pressure on them, which is why they brought me into their home. Unfortunately, this debt also meant that the rent payments I get them weren't necessarily being forwarded, taking a rather roundabout route to get to the landlord. So far roundabout, in fact, that we were served with an eviction notice.
I discovered this state of affairs 5 days after the 7-day notice was served, when the real estate agent came by to try to obtain payment.
I gave Fatty and Gromit my notice the next day and began the search for a new home.
My loving partner Laura trained 10 hours across the country to my rescue to help me find a new place, pack, move, and then later pick out some furniture.
We eventually settled on a 2-bedroom apartment in Carlton, which is about 10 minutes walk away from the office. I'm sharing the apartment with a software designer named David, who's an absolute gentleman, neat, tidy, and best of all, mentally stable.
And since Fatty and Gromit were anything but, it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
And can I just take this opportunity to say a big public thank you to Lou, because without her, things just wouldn't have happened as smoothly and as easily as they did.
So as I settle into the new place, with an internet connection, Dazza's war on everything shall resume harder, faster and better than ever. So stay tuned people, and you'll be seeing a lot more of me over the coming weeks.
Thank you ever so kindly for your patience and your loyalty during this time, and for those of you with blogs of your own, I'll endeavour to get around to them in the very near future. Take care out there.